Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your weekends, especially in this particularly trying school year. It's really great to see everyone coming together, social studies teachers coming together as a community to do some work with the standards on behalf of the Connecticut Council for the Social Studies. I thank you and I welcome you to this process. I'm Tony Roy, the president of Connecticut Council for Social Studies. I also teach at Global Experience Magnet School in Bloomfield. I'm a high school teacher. I teach civics and I teach a capstone course and also advisory. So that's kind of my wheelhouse. I've been in the field for about 15 years or so. Right now is an excellent time to start this process of revising the standards. First off, because the very principles of our democracy are being challenged both locally and nationally, because Americans' rights are in the balance, because the collective knowledge and expertise of Connecticut's teachers can and will chart the path forward for our nation, and because the time is right and social studies matters. So my main objective today is going to talk about why we're doing this work, how we're going to do this work, and what specifically it is that we're going to do. Then Steve Armstrong is going to kick off for a little bit of review and overview of the inquiry process. We're going to have our project associates lead a session on the guiding principles, which will obviously guide our work. We'll take a little break after that, and we'll come back with a panel of our diversity consultants, and then a presentation by Bethany J. from Salem State University. And then finally, we'll have some breakout groups at the end of our time together. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to share my screen, and I'm going to walk you through the website that we developed. I'm actually going to drop it into the chat as well for folks that like to follow it on their own, so that you can check out the website that we're going to use to coordinate our work. So I'm going to share my screen now. Boom. Okay, so this is the website that we're going to use to organize our work. So maybe this is the first time you're seeing this. I sent it out this morning in an email to each of the writing groups, so you had access to that. Just really the goal of this project is to employ an equity lens to develop materials that provide both window and a mirror for Connecticut's and window and a mirror for Connecticut's and U.S. history, while providing the habits of mind and competencies to take informed action in the classroom, school, community, state, and world. Okay, this language is actually pulled from a grant that we received from Connecticut Humanities to help fund the project. Up to this point, our work really has focused within a steering committee and also a leadership team that includes myself and the project associates. We'll go over that in just a moment. The two big pieces of material that we produced in the steering committee is the Connecticut Social Studies Standards Project Research Report, which was a review of standards from across the country that we use to kind of guide our work, and also the guiding principles. This was a laborious process. Probably took us about 3 or 4 months, I would say, to put it together. And we're going to go into this a little bit more in depth throughout the day. So we're not going to go over it now, but it's here for you to check out on your own. I'm going to go over here to the About page just really quickly. So just really quick, we have 4 partners: Connecticut Council for the Social Studies, that's my organization. Our vision is a world in which students are educated and inspired for lifelong inquiry and informed civic action. And our mission, in alignment with the National Council for the Social Studies, is to advocate and build capacity for high quality social studies by providing leadership, services, and support to educators. Our other partners, Connecticut State Department of Ed, which Steve Armstrong is the representative of that organization. He'll be addressing us very soon. We're also working with the Connecticut Democracy Center and Connecticut Humanities. So this is a partnership between these 4 organizations to bring the new standards to fruition. Really, where this all begins is with a law that was passed in special session last summer. And basically, this law provided funding. It was an implementer bill, provided funding for a Model K curriculum across disciplines. So in mathematics and English and social studies and other disciplines as well. This law is the reason that we are embarking on this project. It's the impetus and the major funding source for the project. And the mandate prompts the curriculum to include particular content. And I have a little graphic here. And really the content can be broken into two pieces: agency and representation. Agency meaning financial literacy, climate change, civic citizenship, including digital citizenship and media literacy, social emotional learning and racism, and representation being Native American studies, Asian American and Pacific Islander studies, LGBTQ plus studies, military service, and experience of American veterans. The two groups that weren't represented here, I'm pretty sure is because the African American, Black, Latino, and Puerto Rican studies course was passed in Public Act 19-12. So I think that's why they were left out here, but we're not going to leave them out, right? It's going to be part of our process. We're going to be thinking about how we can make sure we have representation of all groups in the standards. So a little bit about the organizational structure. Steve and I are the project directors, and there are sort of a level playing field of folks that are helping implement, which would be the project associates, which we're going to go over each of them. We introduce to each of them in a little bit. A project manager, and then also research assistants. So these are the folks that are really driving the bus, so to speak, to get this project done. And then we also have a cadre, if you will, of consultants that represent different areas of expertise. Brittany Yancey, Jason Chang, Michael Bartone, Chris Newell, Juan Coronado, and Alan Marcus are helping us kind of pull this all together so that we have representation and a single voice throughout the document. A little bit more about stakeholders. So this process has been going on, I would say, since October, very late October. We kicked this off at the annual conference, Connecticut Council for the Social Studies annual conference, where we had a leadership meeting. Many of you that are here today were in that meeting. And that was kind of the beginning of our time together. So you can see here with the map that we have on the left-hand side, there are, this includes people that are on the steering committee. This includes the leadership. This includes the writing teams. This is where the representation is from on this heat map that you can see on the left-hand side. So we were conscientious to try to get as much of the state geographically represented as possible. We've also gone through a pretty rigorous process to get stakeholder input. One of those ways being a survey. We concluded the survey on May 6th, and we're still in the process of analyzing that data, and also focus groups. So we held 4 focus groups very recently, and that was all to provide insight and analysis of what do we need to include in the standards, right? So we're taking a very inclusive process to make sure that we are getting as many voices heard as possible. And you can see here the survey respondents. This is where we had a majority of this is where we had our survey respondents from. The darker the color on the map means the more folks from that town or city responded. So you can see kind of where we got our responses from. And then down here below, we have a steering committee that has guided this process. There's, I think it's 50 people on the steering committee. It's a very big steering committee, but it represents various different areas of the social studies ecosystem. You can see here we have a timeline of the different events, or excuse me, meetings that we had and the process that we went through to develop the guiding principles. And then you can also see the breakdown of the different representation of professional roles. I mean, admittedly, elementary ed is a underrepresented area. So we're going to have to, I think that's understandable, but elementary ed was represented for sure in the survey responses. So we are cognizant that that's an area of weakness, I guess you could say. But anyway, so that's kind of the about. A little bit more about the how. is these different pages here. So you can see that we have these different pages, clearly. I'm gonna go to the K2 page, which is kind of organized to help us with the process, okay? Each page begins, or at the top, it lists who the project associate is, the team leader of that group. It also has some collaboration norms, and I'm just gonna go over those just really quickly. I'm not gonna go in depth about them, but promoting a spirit of inquiry, pausing, so like listening and making sure there's wait time, paraphrasing, probing for specificity, putting ideas on the table, paying attention to self and others, and presuming positive intent or intention. I'm hoping that maybe at this point, if anyone would like to recommend a norm for collaboration, maybe someone would like to open up their mic so we can add one. If not, we can say that, hey, we're all going to live by these norms in terms of our collaboration. I'm pausing right now. I'm not sure if you can tell. Okay, cool. Okay, great, excellent. And I'm sure as you're going through with your process, each team is going to develop their own set of unique norms that probably build upon these or enhance or augment the norms that we have here. But I figured this was a nice starting point. Okay, let's look at the resources that we have. So the resources, now I haven't shared the Google Drive collaboration folder with everyone yet. Later on today, we have to make sure that we get an email account from each person that actually has access to Google Drive, because some people have an AOL account or a Comcast account, and I just want to make sure that we have accounts that can access the folders, because we are going to use Google Drive for collaboration. But you can see here, we also have, so this is the K-2 group, right? We also have each of the frameworks for this writing team. They're actually broken out, so you can go directly to, just really quickly, you could go directly to, let's say, the kindergarten frameworks. And a little bit later today, you're going to be working with those. Of course, they're not loading right away like they did this morning when I practiced, but that's okay. We also have it here for grade 1 and grade 2. And then finally here at the bottom, we have the writing team contact list. So if you need to reach out to one of your team members via email, I have in there their name, the organization that they represent, and also their email. And again, I haven't shared that out because for confidentiality reasons, I'm only going to share it to the people that are on those teams. So not everyone will have everyone's email because not everyone wants to be that accessible. So I just wanted to be cognizant of that. So once we have the emails that everyone would like shared with these, I'll email them out there, and you'll be able to open all of these links for each of the different pages. So you can see here, Mary Hannah is going to be leading the grades 3 to 5 group. Up here, we have grades 6 and 7 in Modern World. We group those together to have some thoughts about vertical alignment, right? So they have their own page as well. That's led by Lauren. And then grade 8 in grade 8 in high school US history, led by Allison. Again, each of these pages kind of has the same information on it. And again, you'll really get to know these folks a little bit later as we go through the process. And then finally, we have Jen leading out with the civics group. And then if we scroll down the page here, let's just go down this page a little bit more. We have these themes. Now, these themes were developed from the guiding principles. And the themes that we settled on are justice, representation, inclusivity, global context, agency, and local connections. And again, you're going to learn more about the guiding principles a little bit later. We're spending a whole 45 minutes on that. But in addition to just having them listed as words, we have some definitions. And I'm not going to go through them all right now. You'll have time to go through these later of what each of these means. And we actually went through and had these vetted not only by our leadership team, but also by the consultants, the diversity consultants that we're working with. So each one has a little graphic and a little definition about what it means. And really, what are the roles of the themes? The themes are going to drive our work, okay? So when you're working within your grade level bands or your content area band, we're going to be thinking about how is it that we can hit these different themes when we're writing our standards. All right, we'll talk more about that and we'll develop that more as we go on. Again, this is a very 30,000 foot view of what we're doing. Okay, next thing I just want to talk about is the organization. This is a sample organization. It is a draft. We are still working out the finer details of what it all means. So just so you know, this is the what we're going to be doing. This is the what of what we're going to do. So our primary task is to create grade level standards by adding content to the indicators listed in the Connecticut elementary and secondary social studies frameworks. All right, well, what does that mean? We have social studies frameworks that were passed in 2015. We're now engaging in a process to develop standards based on the frameworks. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the frameworks. We're going to think about content that can be embedded inside these frameworks or on these frameworks. And then once we're done and this new document is approved, the frameworks are going to fade away, right? We're using the frameworks as the roadmap, so to speak. We're using this as the container, I think is a better descriptor, a container through which the content will be added. And again, we're going to go over this more in depth later when we get into the writing. This is just an overview. So there's going to be a set of anchor standards, which are developed from the C3 in the Connecticut frameworks. Oh, also the numbering system. This is a draft numbering system. The more I look at it, the more I realize it needs to be reworked, but you're not gonna have to worry about numbers. That's Alan's business. Alan Marcus is gonna really be worried about these numbers. So in addition to the anchor standards, basically what we're going to do is we're going to create grade level standards that add content. In 2015, when we created the frameworks, we purposefully left out content. We did make some suggestions. And one of the things that we learned since 2015, so over the past 7 years, is that teachers are looking for more guidance, more guidance. And the survey responses, what we've learned is that, sure, they want more guidance, but teachers still want broad standards that, that also provide examples of content that can be included. So that's what we have right here, suggestions for content. So we have the grade level standards, for instance, use sequence of events to illustrate the causes of the American Revolution would be a grade level standard for grade 5. And then we're looking here, another one here that has to do more with perspectives is explain how elements of personal identity shaped individual perspectives of the American Revolution. And then this is where we have the content suggestions. We have, it says here, the different types of identities that you could look at when you are trying to meet this standard. And then finally, each of the grade level standards is going to have a discipline code. It's going to be connected. You're going to show the connection to either history or geography or civics. So again, this is a draft, but this is basically the work that we're going to be doing. Again, it's going to be adding content to the grade level standards, or excuse me, creating grade level standards by adding content to the indicators listed in the Connecticut elementary and secondary social studies frameworks. Okay, the last thing I'm going to go over just really briefly, we're going to talk about this much more in depth later. What's on this resources page? Oh, this is not complete yet. My fault. This is supposed to have the standards on it, but I was messing around with it. Don't worry about that. We're going to be talking a lot more about the Educating for American Democracy roadmap. We're not going to delve into that today. This document came out in 2021. It is going to guide our work for sure. But again, we didn't want to get too far down the road with so many different initiatives that our heads are spinning. But you can check these out if you're so inclined. And excuse me, again, this is going to guide our work. And the last thing we have here is in 2021, the Fordham Institute created this overview of different standards that kind of rated the standards. And we used that report to figure out, okay, what did exemplary standards look like? And then we researched those, we dug deep into those, and we pulled out the pieces that we thought worked best for Connecticut. And that's kind of how we got to the point of having this. Let me scroll down here just for a minute here. Having this sample organization. The last thing we're going to go over is the project checkpoints. This is draft. This is something, if folks were on earlier, they may have seen Ed was asking about this. Basically, May 14, we're starting the project. August 5th is when the second draft of the social studies standards are due to the State Department of Ed for review. August 5th. Not a lot of time. You'll notice here that June 30th, we have a first draft that is due. A lot of this work that you're going to do within your teams is going to be led by the project associates. And you're going to do a lot of the work in the teams. We won't be meeting as a large group each time we do the work, right? We will be coming together for review. We will be coming together one more time before we actually get started with writing to make sure everyone has the information they feel like they need to get started. But just so you know, you will be kind of working not on your own individually, but on your own working as a group. And you'll be coordinating your own schedules to make that happen. The project checkpoints, if they're not on all of the bottom of the pages, they will be today. If I mess that up, I'll get that done today. Okay, that's kind of the overview. I'm going to stop my share now. I do want to pause just before we kick it over to Steve. Once I can find my screen here, I'm going to. Sorry about that. I lost my my thing here. I would like to ask if anyone has any questions. Maybe we can go ahead and put those in the chat. And then what we could do is the questions, we'll look at those. And then maybe we won't be able to answer them today, but I'll at least know the questions that we need to answer in a follow-up. All righty. So if anyone has any questions, let's go ahead and put them in the chat. Otherwise, my time is up and we'll kick it over to Steve Armstrong. Steve?
Yeah, can you see my little statement there, Tony?
We can, thank you.
Okay. Are there questions for Tony?
Excuse me, I do have a question. This is Carmita. Hi.
Hi, Carmita.
How are you?
Great to see you.
And I'm thinking way ahead. I was just going to put it in the chat, and maybe this should be one of the norms that people be patient with questions.
That's for sure.
But my question is, and I'm thinking way ahead. These standards that we're developing, in my mind, I'm thinking eventually that will have an impact on our district's current curriculum, whether that means updating, revising, whatever else to align with the new standards. Am I wrong?
Yes, that's a great point. So we realize the state, we meaning Connecticut Council for Social Studies, the State Department of Education, realize that after or once or while the standards are being developed, there's going to be a great need for professional development, and folks are going to need some help with implementation plans. We are going to create an implementation plan for sure for districts. We're considering creating a like a review guide to like look at your current curriculum and see how it aligns, because not everything's going to need to be changed. But yes, this will have an impact. But again, we have to realize that Connecticut is a local control state, and social studies is not a tested discipline. So I would hate to say that they're recommendations, but they're more of guidance, I guess you could say, for how curriculum can be developed at the local level. Does that answer your question?
It does. It does. So yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Carmita, could I, and just to reiterate what Tony says,
Yeah.
we think that they're going to be a damn good guide, but every district, just like every district uses the frameworks in a different way, you would do the same with this new document.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Sure. Other questions?
Tony and Steve, this is Alan. I don't know if you're addressing this later on or not, but did you want to say something quickly about the confidentiality of the work that's being done?
Oh, yes. Thank you. Thanks, Alan, for that. well, Ellen just kind of already said it, but basically this process is confidential as we're going through. So please do not share any of the materials because they are in draft form. We would hate to have materials get out, and especially in today's climate, while we're in draft form, I think it's going to allow us to have a little bit more intellectual freedom and a little bit more truth in our process. So again, the materials that you have access to are going to be confidential. They're actually proprietary information. Each person here that's on a writing team, you will be paid for your time. There will be contracts that are going to come out very soon. We're just waiting to get our first check from the State Department of Ed so we can, with fidelity, issue those contracts. And within the contract, it also says that confidentiality is a priority. And I guess the one last thing that we have to take into consideration is that there are a wide range of folks that are on these calls, and we should be mindful of listening to folks, right? Taking into consideration as many perspectives as possible, because I think with a true and honest collective effort, we're going to come to a wonderful conclusion.
Tony, I had a question related to that with the privacy piece.
Yeah.
This is Annie Tucci. Sorry if
I
my
see you.
picture doesn't come up.
I see you.
Do you want, when we collect information to get us on our writing teams and to be able to share the drives, do you want it to be our personal Gmail accounts and not our school district Gmail, Google accounts?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm okay if folks would prefer to use their work, unless someone else has a objection. I'm okay if folks use their work email, just because they like to keep their professional stuff all together. I'd be okay with that, but we are going to need access to Google Drive.
I would just, Tony, recommend if individuals have certain parameters or around the work that you do on your school. Some districts have policies around the work that you create and your ability to receive compensation for that work on your school drive. So I just recommend, not everybody has that, but there are some districts that have reported that. So just check with your IT or your,
Correct. Yeah, that's what I was
whoever.
thinking too. Like,
Yeah.
I figured I would bring it up that way. And so everybody should check their own situation just to make sure that nobody's in breach of their contracts or things like that.
Great reminders. I will say one more piece is we don't have to be like, close the windows like they did at the Declaration of Independence, and we're all sweating it out here because we're trying to keep everything so secret. If you want to speak with a colleague about the process and things like that, like, kind of get some feedback. Oh, this is kind of what I'm working on. This is really exciting. What do you think? Like I think that's part of the process. I would just say, let's not share materials if possible. And of course, if you're concerned with your district hanging on to any materials or Google Docs that you create, because like they're going to say, oh, I have ownership of this now, then maybe, yes, I would consider being sure that we use a personal Gmail account. Okay. Any other questions from folks?
Yes, I have a question,
Great.
and it might be, well, we'll just go with it from here. Where it had African American and Latinx curriculum and all of that not included in the slide that you had further up. When we redo this, can that be included in there despite the fact that they left it out?
Yes, that's our intent. We are definitely going to do that. It's interesting, Waltrina, when I was working on, and I had a very, very small role with the PA 19-12 curriculum that was developed. But at every meeting, the folks that were developing the curriculum were saying, man, I wish, and folks that were reviewing it, man, I wish that this was included in every grade, not just high school for one elective, right? That is what's driving this process.
Yeah.
Right? That sort of representation, that sort of inclusivity to make sure that we're hitting this K-12. Right. That's what's driving this process. But thank you for bringing that up. I realize that it was not in that Public Act 21-12, but it is our intent. And it's also required by the grant that we got. to be included that way. So,
Okay,
but thank you very much for
terrific.
bringing that up.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, Steve, you're up. Thanks so much.
How much time do I have?
You're looking at about 15 minutes or so.
Great. Speaking from the State Department of Education, and this is from our commissioner, Charlene Russell Tucker. And I spoke to her about this process yesterday, and she is aware of everything we're doing and is very appreciative of our work. So that should not be forgotten. A couple things that have been mentioned already that I'd just like to comment on. This work is, as Tony said, working off of a couple other curriculum initiatives that are going on. First off, as we've spoken, several people have spoken on, is that as most people here would know, that the African American, Black, Latino, Puerto Rican Studies course is going into effect for all Connecticut high schools starting this fall. And I would remind you, for those that aren't that familiar with it, the course does not, the legislation and the course requirements are not that every kid's going to take the course. They don't have to, but we would encourage it. And it's that every school has to offer the course, and that's starting this fall. Some other legislation that's playing into this is there's legislation that was passed last session that's starting in the fall of 2024, that all secondary schools have to include Native American history / studies in their secondary social studies curriculum. Now, again, the legislation doesn't say how much, it doesn't say where, but that's playing into the legislation because that's a separate bit of legislation that says every high school or middle school, you got to be doing this. So that's a bit of legislation that came in. On the session that just completed, similar legislation was passed, and I'm not getting the wording exactly right, I apologize, that Pacific Asian American Studies, same legislation, must be included in secondary school social studies education beginning in 2025. So that's additional legislation that Tony had mentioned, and there was about the K-8 curriculum, the model curriculum that will be based on these standards for social studies. Originally, if you look at the legislation, it says that we have to complete the K-8 curriculum by January of 2023. That would be next January. That would certainly be a stretch for us, to state the obvious. The commissioner has asked the legislators if that could be extended for all the disciplines to January 2024. And just last week, the legislators agreed with that. So the work on the model curriculum that was supposed to start it was supposed to be completed in 2023, January, is now going to be completed in January, has to be completed in January 2024. That gives us a little more time to do the work appropriately. Some people may want to know what's the procedure for how is something passed? Okay, great. This group creates a group of standards, a really outstanding group of standards. What's the next step? Well, there's 3 steps. Step 1 is that the document has to be approved by the Commissioner of Education. So that's step 1. Probably before that's done, probably after the first draft or maybe the second draft, the State Board of Education has a curriculum and instruction subcommittee. We would have a meeting with that subcommittee this is a group of a subcommittee of the State Board of Education, and we would take the document to them and they would make comments on it. And then the final stage would be passage of the document by the Connecticut State Department of by the Connecticut Board of Education. Some states have documents like this approved by the state legislature. That's not an approach that Connecticut has. The Connecticut approach is that documents like this get approved by the State Board of Ed. So that's just some information on how things get approved. I just have after this, 5 very minimalist statements that I'd like to have you guys think about. Is first off, and I found this very hard when I'm on state or even in a couple of cases nationwide groups, is remember you're writing this document. We're all writing this document for the teachers and students of Connecticut. And so I know this is real hard, but remember, you're not just thinking about your own district when you're doing this. You know, and I'm not being negative by saying this, but just reminding you that, you know, you're not just saying, wow, this would work great if we did this in Bristol or if we did this in Naugatuck or someplace. We're writing this for all the teachers and students of Connecticut. So probably best, if possible, to keep, I mean, you can always use your own district as a reference point, but when possible, think in a broader way than just your own town or your own school. Another thing is I would really like from the state perspective, be robust when you write this, be bold when you write this. Because I can tell you, there's many districts, I've personally spoken to district leaders, district curriculum leaders in at least 10 districts who are going to want to use this document to improve their social studies curriculum. Some of them say that, wow, we don't know what to, there's actually people who've said, we need a document like this to base our curriculum reform on. So don't play that short. Don't hold back. We want this to be a guide, a document that's going to guide curriculum reform for the next 5 to 8 years. So be robust. Districts are looking in many cases for this type of guidance. And I would say, I mean, I don't know that this is an appropriate time, but just if you don't know inquiry instruction or you're against inquiry instruction or something like that, probably this isn't the right place for you, because inquiry instruction, putting the students at the center of learning, and when we break into curriculum groups, we'll do more on the specifics of this. But inquiry instruction is going to be the key to this document. So the instructional model, and this plays in for those that know the 2015 frameworks, this plays directly into that we want to have inquiry instruction as the key. And I think all of our groups so far have realized that that's sort of a non-negotiable. And I would sort of remind you that there's districts, and maybe this is okay to start, that we have our unit, and then at the end we have an inquiry activity, and that's the end of inquiry. I think inquiry is more than just creating an activity. Inquiry is an instructional mindset. That if we're going to say we're going to do inquiry, what we're going to do, we're going to put the students at the center of the learning. And certainly as we proceed with this, we will give you more details on that if needed. A part that's created controversy, and that's probably a light term, is this part of taking informed action and civic engagements. That's the 4th dimension of the inquiry arc. And just I'll just remind you that what we want to do, we want kids to take informed action. We want kids to be civically engaged. And our job is to give students the tools to be civically engaged. That's, I think, the job of civics education, to give kids the tools to do this. I think where some teachers and some programs have run into trouble, I'm not sure in most cases if it's the job of teachers or districts. I know at the elementary and maybe middle school this is necessary, but to tell students what that action should be. You know, I think we give the students the tools to do it. Let's let the students decide what that action should be. I think that would keep us out of a little bit of trouble that some places, some teachers in some places have had. I think it's key that this document, and teachers have specifically said this, they want this document to support and to honor good teaching. There's great social studies teachers in Connecticut, and they want this document to honor the work of great teachers. And we sure as heck want to do that. And, you know, I know there's people that are in this group that will be working on, you know, middle school and high school stuff. But really, really, really what I think the entire group would love is there's a sense by many that social studies has sort of got shortchanged in the elementary school. And I think that if this document can provide some help to elementary school teachers who want to improve social studies in their districts, that's only a plus. But there's teachers right now, I mean, I've spoken to them, you've probably spoken to them, who feel that they're sort of out there on their own, you know, without much support. Well, you know what? If they're doing a good job, let's have this document support the work that they're doing. Anyone have questions or comments on any of that?
Well,
I
people are
agree.
Oh, go ahead, please. Go ahead,
I-
Carmita. Or no,
I-
Waltrina, my fault.
I apologize for just chiming in, but I got excited about it. Yeah, I agree. At the elementary level, I teach third grade, and we are always coming up with creative ways to bring social studies to life with our third graders and students under that level. And I just think it's a disservice for our children not to be exposed to so many of the issues and things that take place today, because they have a lot to say about it. They have a lot to say about it, and they have a lot of creative things to share. So that was one thing I wanted to comment on. The other thing is concerning African American and Latinx studies being, I guess, what you call optional, you know, with students being able to select it. Why is that? And what can we do to make it mandatory throughout? It shouldn't be something that's optional. It's an integral part of the history of this country. So what can we do to make it not an optional feature?
Could I just say, could I, Jen, give me just, go ahead, Jen, then I'll follow up.
I was just gonna say, I think about that comment a lot. Well, Trina, I have been conducting research and just finished my dissertation on this topic. And I think part of this work is getting this quality document to be so excellent.
Yeah.
And there's a separate body of work that our Public Affairs Committee is doing to not only look at how important it is, but actually show the stakeholders what they want to know, which is the data, that it's better for kids, it's better for outcomes, it's better for communities.
Yeah.
Right? That's a separate, it's hard to sort of think about it that way because we're just trying to work together on the frameworks, but we do need those voices.
Yeah.
Because the data shows that when kids at the elementary level are engaged in these kinds of conversations from an early age, and we don't wait until 6th grade to talk about these topics, they're actually performing better in school and have better outcomes. So we have to tell sort of both stories, what to teach and how to teach it, and then like why that other group of people. And I'm sorry. Thank you, Steve, for letting
No,
me.
well,
sure.
thank you
And
for
I
sharing
was,
that.
and I was not suggesting, if I came across that way, that the teaching of this should be optional. The point I was trying to make specifically is the legislation that created the course specifically, the legislation states that this specific course is an elective course. And I mean, so I'm not suggesting that in a broader sense that the teaching of the topic shouldn't be taught. I was just saying that when the legislation was made, putting the course out there, that it was the legislation stated it was an elective course.
Okay, but even with that said, is there any way that that can be reversed or challenged to not make it an elective, but to make it rather a mandatory thing for all students?
Well, that would, I mean, that would be done, that would have to, I mean, by the way, there are districts on their own. I think Miriam's on here and a couple other people. If you want to, if a district wants to make this a mandated course, there are districts that have done that. So there's nothing to say that a district that you work in can't make this mandated, but that would be done on a district level. If the state was to mandate the course, that would have to come from additional legislation, because we can't overturn or we can't overturn some legislative action. But you know what? If a district wants to make it mandated, districts have done it, and I think Miriam, if you're on, or somebody else that's on, could say that there's districts that have done that. Annie?
One of the things that we were facing, I had moved districts in between this legislation. So when I say we, I'm talking very broadly, and not specific to my current district, but with the course, because of being a full year as an elective, to make it mandatory with the way the graduate requirement changes occurred also for the class of 2023, a lot of school boards revamped all their grad requirements and the credits, and then so it shifted a lot of things like really quickly. So what we've been doing is looking at the curriculum to embed those content pieces into our regular, our current coursework too, because if the course doesn't run, right, because if students don't elect to take it, then so I think coming back to the conversation about our standards and the work that we have facing us, that the work from CERC and the curriculum that came out can certainly help support all of this work, because it was the research that was behind it, and I just wanted to kind of bring us back to like our purpose with the standards of making sure that that's inclusive. That's all.
Great point. We're starting to get a little bit behind, so we're gonna move along. I do want to just make two very quick comments. Number one, that a lot of the teachers I'm talking to are saying that they're looking for the standards to create some sort of a cover, so to speak, so they could do the good work that they know is important in their classrooms. So if they could look to the standard and say, here it is, this is what I'm pulling from, in terms of either taking informed action or inquiry or diversity and representation and inclusion, that's what this document is going to provide. But in the long run, I think we have to remember that it's good or it's bad. The content in Connecticut is not required at all, right? So these are going to be strong suggestions. The only way to make things a little bit more required might be, again, passing legislation that would mandate certain things. But at the point that it is right now, all we can do is do a good faith effort to provide the resources and the guidance that folks need to make the best decisions for their classrooms.
And Tony,
anything else on this? Just briefly, go ahead, Steve, and then we got to move on.
Yeah, one thing is, we're aware, I'm talking about all of us, I think, that it's probably there's probably going to be some political blowback to this. Because if it's like every other state that's done this work in the last 2 years, there is. I can just tell you, we have our people, I mean, I'm informed the commissioner knows this. Our people at the State Department of Ed know this and are prepared to work to counter that if and when it comes.